Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Rein with us today, and he's from a company called Genpact, as you would have seen. They are a company of about 45,000 people operating currently, predominantly of which he's the CEO, in South Africa or just in South Africa, considering to do some other engagements later on. And I'm intrigued by the reference that he makes that they are in back office services as opposed to call center services. Well, that intrigues me in some way. But he can talk to more towards that if you wish to. But I'm very pleased, Rein, that you made yourself available to share with us today a bit about your experience as the country manager of Genpact in South Africa. So, welcome.
Thank you very much. I think it's probably important to give a bit of my background, where I come from. So, originally I come from the Netherlands. I'm in South Africa for the last 6 years. Tried to become a South African citizen for the last 6 years. I was almost thrown out of the country at the 31st of December last year because the work permit renewal process that was quite complicated. If you look to my background, I'm an industrial engineer. I studied at the university in the Netherlands, and I worked for about 5 years for Fuji Photofilm. And after 5 years, I decided to start up my own company because I didn't believe that my future was to work for a corporate company for a very long time. So after 5 years, we started up our own company, and 3 years later, we were very fortunate because we could bring our company to the stock market in the Netherlands. So from a corporate citizen, I became an entrepreneur, started my own company, and we brought the first company to the stock market. The interesting thing of that process was that actually in 3 years' time we were able to create, at least for the stock market, a certain value. And of course I was able to become fairly independent. And the good thing about becoming independent was actually to start thinking independently, to make your own decisions, not depending on somebody else. Then after that I moved to Spain for about 4 years, set up another 2 companies. And then when I came back to the Netherlands, I was asked actually to bring that company, a Dutch company, again to the stock market. And after 6 months we were approached by Genpact, the company I work for today, if we are not interested to sell the company to them. And that's what we did in 2007. So as from 2007 onwards, I became a corporate citizen again. And then in 2009 they asked me to start up the company in South Africa, which is actually quite interesting because my plan was to step out of the corporate world again after selling it, to find somebody else as a successor that could run the company, and then start again something new. Because one thing that I've learned as an entrepreneur is that you can set up a company, bring it to the stock market, or sell it, or make it successful once, but if you can do it twice or 3 times, then of course it becomes much more sustainable. I mean, as you get used to some kind of a successful entrepreneurship, it is interesting then to see if you can do something else as well. So in 2009 we started in South Africa, and we started with SAP Miller. So the business that we are in, just to correct some of the numbers that Ben mentioned, Genpact is worldwide about 70,000 people. We are present in probably 20 different countries. We started as a typical business process outsource company where we take processes from, for example, Europe into India or into China to do the same type of process with the same amount of people, but against a cheaper rate. And they call it labor arbitrage. Very interesting model, but what you see over time is that companies ask for more, because at the end, if you can only do it cheaper, that doesn't add value. If you see the evolution of technology, if you see the demands nowadays from companies to, let's say, to be competitive with other companies, you need to add more value. So Genpact started to develop a different strategy. So part of our knowledge that we obtained by setting up BPO entities in different parts of the world, we use that as a consulting type of services to companies. So companies that said to us, listen, we don't want you to take over our processes, but we want you to improve our process and help us to drive in efficiencies. So we set up a consulting company as well at the same time. So part of our business now is not only BPO, but it's also consulting business. And what we are focused on every day, and every moment of the day, is to make things more efficient and more effective. If we can't do that, we will be obsolete very quickly. Because the model that we apply on our services is that every year we give a discount on our prices. So every year we reduce the amount of headcount and do things smarter. So we apply smarter technology, we apply smarter process optimizations. So when we started in South Africa in 2009, the good thing was that because I worked in Spain, I was used to work in a different culture. When I moved to Spain for the first time after 1 year applying all my Dutch knowledge and Dutch theories, I found out that they were not interested at all in my theories. So I learned from that you always must be, if you move to a different country, you must act like you're a guest. If you become too dominant in terms of, listen, I'm going to tell you how the world looks like because I've done it before, it doesn't work. So it was good learning when I started in South Africa, and I applied that knowledge, and I think I benefit a lot from that. So another thing that was very typical when we started in South Africa, we didn't actually really have a strategy. Genpact didn't have a strategy for Africa. Africa, of course, if you look to the size of Africa, it's about 1 billion people. If you look to the size of India and China, it's probably 1.1, 1.2 billion people. So why can you not compare Africa to India or China in terms of development? Well, we didn't have any view about it because nobody knows anything about Africa. If you go, when I moved to South Africa, my friends told me, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Johannesburg. And he said, do you want to be killed? I said, well, actually not, but I love South Africa and I haven't been to Johannesburg, but we will overcome that. So there's very little knowledge about Africa in terms of what you can do and what you can't do. And also I think the belief that you can grow your business from South Africa into Africa is a bit of a myth. You really need to have experience, I guess, in South Africa before you can move into other countries. You also need to understand, and I did an extensive travel for about 6 months in 10 different African countries, in very rural areas, that there is hardly anything in Africa. Only in the main capitals you start to see business coming up. So if you want to grow from South Africa into Africa, you really need to know what type of sectors you want to be in and what type of customers you want to approach. So we didn't actually start in South Africa with a big strategy. 5 years down the line, we have more than 20 customers. About half our business is related to consultancy and advisory, and the other half is related to business process outsourcing. One of the things that we've noticed, which is a big difference between, so what I wanted, what my goal and aim was in South Africa, what my challenge was, is to say, why can we not do things smarter and better than the Indians? Okay, why do we need Indians in South Africa to do things smarter? And I was very convinced that we could do things better. 5 years down the line, what I've noticed is that if you look to our workforce in South Africa, it's mainly, I could call it the matric plus type of people. So they finished high school, and the level of the high school in South Africa is unfortunately not that great. Plus 2 or 3 years of experience, you put them into your business and try to run Six Sigma Lean, with statistical analysis of how can you do things smarter to drive innovation. And we found it very difficult to compete with the Indian people. If you look to the workforce we have in India, everybody has at least a graduate, and most of them also have an MBA. So the need for education in India is so, and the hunger for education is so high that even people in low entry jobs have a university degree. So what we tried all kinds of different models. We brought in Indians, then we sent them back, then we made a blend model. And the stage that we're in now is that we want to convert the complete workforce into a degree workforce, because we believe that we need to benefit from, if we want to go for innovation, process optimization, analytics, we need to have a better skilled workforce, unfortunately, even for the entry-level jobs. So we're working currently, and to drive that, because that's one of the themes that we want to drive for the next 3 years, is that we found a very interesting university in Johannesburg, which is called Maharishi. Maharishi University gives people from a disadvantaged background in the townships the opportunity to study, so they provide bursaries, and they apply the distant learning concept. Because of the lack of proper, I should say, teachers or professors in South Africa, they use distant learning as a concept. And what we're going to do, we're going to set up a company in the university. We're going to use the students that are, let's say, studying there. We're going to give them a part-time job as part of the, let's say, deal. And we're going to give them guarantee for the 2 years after they graduate in terms of giving them a job. The big advantage of having that is that the students can work and study at the same time and can finance their study. And for us, the good thing is that we can apply, going back to your point, we can apply our Six Sigma and Lean DNA. We can put that into the curriculum. And when they come out of the university, they have 3 years of work experience. They know what Six Sigma and Lean is, how you can apply statistics in a more business environment. Plus, they can work with ERPs. So they can work with complex software systems, rather than they come out of the university and hardly can use Excel. So the experience in South Africa till now, I'm a South African lover, and when you were talking about wildlife photography, I just got a, let's say, small movie from my wife showing an elephant that gave birth to a youngster about 2 days ago, so I'm very much into wildlife. The experience in Africa in terms of skilled workforce has been, I would almost say, a bit problematic. And what we try to do now is to, instead of living with it, we try to change it. We try to find a new concept of getting a better workforce that can help us to drive the PPO business in South Africa, rather than that companies are going to move a part of their processes outside South Africa into India or China.
All right. So BPO, Sachava, any questions?
Specific way of asking or to what I want to ask. I guess I'm pretty.
Whichever is the more important.
We have, for the more important one for me is that we have people that come from the education background, and the benchmark is matric, and the business community is saying that's not good enough. I'm trying to see how big that gap is between what the people that are setting the exams or whatever educating our kids and where the business community is. The competitiveness that you are bringing into the table to say how competitive are we as a workforce at entry level, there seems to be quite a big gap, and that scares me. I'll stop there.
Okay. Yes.
So just a comment. So I agree with you fully. We went with the same approach at the stage I was with Neotel. So to bridge the gap between what we had, also too much data, not a lot of analytics, but no practical application that actually helped the business, was the one end, to a workforce that didn't necessarily have the skills to take the company to the next level. We engaged Maharishi. So instead of actually going to student group, what we did is we put more than 30 employees through the program on a part-time basis. But we made the program relevant to the business itself. So the projects driven by the group was to solve the actual problems within the business. And it had amazing impact both on the turnover and the growth of the company. And it solved a lot of those issues where we now actually understood, okay, what is the impact of data? What does it mean on our product market fit? What does it mean to our projects? So it had a huge impact on the core layer, especially Lean. They focus a lot on Lean. I won't even go into transcendental. But Lean and the way that they did it could apply directly to our delivery system and actually improve the timelines as well. So huge impact on the company itself through Maharishi.
Great.
Great. I think what you're doing is noble, because you're trying to enhance the South African population to deliver those services. I'm in the IT sector, I'm an IT business, and in our sector there are 20,000 foreigners, Indians, Russians, Ukrainians, wherever, delivering services into South Africa. We've got the economic impact, foreign exchange, all that. The conundrum is we've got a skill shortage that in an unemployed environment. Skill shortage, unemployment, foreigners filling the gap. The challenge, and I think you're starting with, how do we accelerate that, is how do you fill the skill shortage from the unemployed and uneducated or lower educated to eventually be self-sufficient, because we're spending all this money enhancing another country's people, and here we've got all these problems at home. You started with, how do we accelerate that? Because I jump on my podium every week in the press around saying, how do we empower South Africa to support South Africa?
One thing that I've noticed, I find it very strange, and maybe some of you can give me an answer to that, is we provide a lot of Harvard online training. So we have an extensive Harvard online training program that everybody can access any point of time in the day. We have a massive push, I should say, towards our workforce, and especially towards the matrics, to do those courses and to discuss it and to follow it. If you look to the participation at the end of the year in terms of percentages, it's below 5% participation. So we give a lot of opportunities to enhance the matric level people. But in one way or another, we haven't cracked the nut on how can we motivate people to get into that process and get better educated and understand that if you educate yourself better, that your chances going forward are also better. And a lot of people from India say, listen, South Africans just don't want to learn. So they don't want to learn.
Doesn't want to learn.
So they start to instruct them and say, listen, you don't want to learn, so I tell you what to do, and that's what's going to happen. And I don't believe that that's true, but I also don't know what the answer is to how can you unleash the potential of those people and motivate them to say, okay, I give you the opportunity, even within the 8 hours that you are at work, to do some of those. Harvard sounds very high-end type of training, but it's just a lot about soft skills, a lot about 1 or 2 hour trainings. You just don't do it. And that's I find the most problematic part of our workforce at this stage. The willingness.
I would like to add into my colleague from the IT industry here. You know, for us to employ 100 people last year, we interviewed 5,700 people. And each of them was a post-matric certification, majority with degrees. Not in our particular field, any degree. And yes, about 120 passed the test actually. It's a serious indictment. Now, as a reasonably small company in terms of global size, we have 36 learners every single year. But the financial impact of that is in the millions. There's only so much you can train. And I would say, Sophie, teaching people anything to do with logic and reasoning and sound reasoning, because logic in maths is the core of it, but that doesn't need to sound reasoning. Sound reasoning is based on observing the world around you. And we find that the big fall down is the ability to reason and logic, coming up with a reasonable answer to a problem. Serious challenge, I think.
So another reason why we want to move into university, because we believe that probably university is better equipped to teach our workforce or future workforce than we are, and the other way around. We are better equipped to provide them work and meaningful assignments than university can do. So at the end, I believe that if we can partner with university, a big part of our educational issues that we currently face might be resolved because we are in a professional institute that's going to help us to educate people in a more, I should almost say, sophisticated way. I don't know if that's very optimistic, but that's at least what I hope.
But what I hear Rolf is saying, it's almost an indictment on the university sector, that having interviewed 5,000 people, 36.
5,700 people.
Yeah. For 100 posts. And you struggled actually to get the level of reasoning and logical understanding.
Yes. I think
so that is a challenge.
But as businesses, we are not universities. We've been forced to become universities and take our focus off what we do. So we need to re-educate people after coming out of school and universities. And clearly that's not a sustainable model. This cannot, in the global context, make us competitive. So, yeah, we can take 5% of our bottom line and invest it in training. But South Africa, with its biggest education budget in Africa, is not meeting the rate. Clearly there's an issue.
Okay, let's hear that Tebogo.
Yeah,
and then Charlie.
I think in our country, education is because I agree with the gentleman that being in the entrepreneurship space, I've been in the space for about 10 years now, and I've realized that the marketplace is like an education people. You know, whether a person has degrees or a master's or anything, you know, and I've realized more than anything, it's more dependent on skills. And of which I think skills is something that can be taught whether somebody is going to degree or not. I mean, with the gentleman that has said that with their model has succeeded in terms of taking some of their employees in terms of equipping them. I always say in my company, I'd rather have an employee with a vision or with a purpose than just an employee that's there to get paid. Because the one that is there with a purpose is able to put in extra effort in terms of learning. They knew why they're there and from their way they're going to apply it. But it's somebody that is just at school, sometimes it's just there at school for them to obtain an education or to get a job. There's no purpose whatsoever as to how they're going to be. That's why as well, sometimes for them to actually be putting in extra effort to actually give themselves or give themselves employable for that matter becomes a problem. Hence sometimes you find things like logic that becomes an issue when you sit in interviewing so many candidates. I would expect that you probably sitting with 1,000 that are potential, but you see from the big number, you see with the very small number that are potential. And I'm sure they just now had to squeeze and pick in a few of those that had potential other than what they really want.
But to put that number a bit in perspective, if you look to how many people we interview in India I think we interview on an annual basis about 600,000 people to fulfill probably 15,000 jobs. So that it's not, the ratio is high, but in India the ratio is also high to find the right candidates.
Yes.
So it's not completely unique for South Africa, I guess, that ratio is low.
Bonile?
I think, Ben, I just want to say that I'm also a businessman, but also one who understands where this country comes from and where it wants to go. You know, some of the comments this afternoon are just, taking things from the top, not really going down to the real problem. And I think even our government at this point in time, in solving the problem, they've tended to copy from someone to say outcomes-based education will help, which to me, we're like a parrot of somebody. Your economy should inform your education. We have got an economy here that has never informed under education, as an example. As a result, people were trained out of that. They were never trained according to what the economy needed. At this point in time, again, we are in another phase. We've got an education that is driven by everything else but the economy. So that's why if you come from elsewhere to invest here, start a new opportunity, you will not find people who are matching what you need, because the economy has never been regarded as the driver of education. I also run a farm. There are people with BS Agriculture, MSc, PhD, who can do nothing for me as a businessman because they're not trained towards that. So therefore what I'm trying to say is that we will have those frustrations, and I think currently, Ben will agree, there's an emphasis at this point in time to say private institutions and private sector organizations like our companies, they should not be given the opportunity to be part of the decision making in terms of what we want, which I think is another problem. 10 years, 20 years from now, we're going to find the same problem as pre-1994, because ideologies, they tend to lead the process when in fact the practical aspects of business are the ones that should be in the forefront. So I thought I must just say that.
So Chawa?
There are so many things that can come out of it. Statistically, by the way, our education system is better. There you go. I'm almost trying to think of government or policy decision makers sitting in this room and having a conversation around some of these problems. Because somebody is advising and informing policy and where the emphasis should be. Who are those people? And the second one is an appreciation of what has got us here, and understanding perhaps that different players need to come and participate a little bit more. we talk about universities, it's almost they are sitting there, and we are sitting there representing universities or a professor. Then that perhaps for you to say, why are you not part of the conversation or pulling your colleagues into this type of discussions?
Well, I just want to make a comment on that whilst you put me on the spot. I presented at a public university, reputable public university last week. They want to revamp their research agenda. So they decided that they want Da Vinci to advise them on how could they bring in more Mo2 concepts and making learning relevant to the business, to the world of work. But it was interesting, the one guy who's a professor stood up and said, but I must remember that universities are not ready to acknowledge scholarly work. Which was an interesting comment. So here's this institution preparing themselves to become more relevant. So to link economy, the economic reality with the education reality. But at the same time saying, but we're not ready to acknowledge scholarly work. So it's almost if they say, I want to do this, but I don't know how to do this. Because all that I know is the theories that I engage with. And I made a comment to them and said, well, you know, this man called Professor Anderson was awarded a professorship 15 years ago by a vice chancellor who argued that he made a contribution to the education world as related to the world of work. And therefore they awarded him a professorship. But the professors of the institution opposed it vehemently because they said, well, he's not an academic. And he said, well, he made a difference in people's lives. And that's why he got his professorship. But it's that same institution, 20 years, 15 years later, that has still not got the message. So it is a problem, Sacham. It's not driven from the reality, as you're rightly saying, Bunile. It's not driven from that reality. There was a question here. Ameka?
Yes.
Get there.
And back there.
Quick question to me, I'll get to you.
You know, this issue of people who come out of the universities don't seem to have knowledge that's relevant in the industry. It didn't start today, even in the construction industry where you teach people engineering and architecture, quantity surveying, town planning and the rest of them, where the technical parameters that are applied in the industry are part of what they used to teach in the universities. Still, the industry complains that when these people come out, they are not as relevant as they would have wanted them to be. They're not as knowledgeable as they wanted them to be. So that is the problem here. The problem here is that the institutions are not the industry. The industry is where the practice is taking place. But what they do in the institution is to give people the basis of practice, a basis of understanding. They have a basic understanding of what is going on. So that actually what you do in the industry, I got confused so much that I began to think exactly what is it that happens in the university. At the point I told myself that it is possible that what's happening in the university is that you are learning how to learn. That is what you go to do in the university. If you are taught, whether you are being taught rubbish or not, I know a lot of people some professors who told me that, look, do this. I know in some time, 10 years time, you're going to remember that one foolish man told you to do it. So he's telling himself that he's a foolish man, but the fact is that he's telling you, learn this. So when you get to university, you learn how to learn. Whether you are being taught rubbish or not, just learn and learn how to learn. So when you go into the industry, then you have applied your mind in the whole science and art of learning. So you go into the industry and they want to teach you what you're going to learn or what you're going to practice in the industry. Then you also learn because you have learned how to learn. Do you get a point? So I think to an extent, what we have right now is that there are so many in the construction area that where I know and I have experience, and that's where I practice. There are too many people who cannot get their diplomas, who cannot even get their qualification because they don't have anywhere in the industry where they are going to do their 1 year industrial training and work experience, which is part of their qualification. The industry, the construction companies and the consultants are complaining that these people don't know anything and we cannot take them along, and government is asking us to take them along, but the government is not giving us anything. There is no substantial quid pro quo. You know, some of them will ask, we want tax rebate so that we can absorb these people. You know, but government is not giving them that. We want something. There has to be something that government would pay so that we can teach these people in this process. But government is not actually doing that. But I believe that in some other countries, maybe your country, where is in Sweden or some in Germany, where they went to buy this, get this FTE, this CETAS kind of stuff. There is a relationship between the industry and the institutions where people learn, while they are learning how to learn in the universities, they also go to industry to learn how to apply the knowledge at the same time. That is what is not happening in South Africa.
And I think there are good examples in America across the world, but we're still struggling with that.
Yes.
Regina?
My comment was, more on same ground as what you say. Because in my industry, we really get frustrated, and you're taking, as your statement is taking me 10 years ago, where we're coming from, in terms of education. If you think of the Technicon, you remember the Technicon old standard and the way of learning technical. You will go in as a student from January to June, you are learning the theory, how to learn. Whether it's whatever, it doesn't matter, but you are taught how to learn. And when you move on from July, when reopening of the schools, July to December, then that's where you go into the industry, you apply the knowledge. On completion of those students, if you had to compare a university, like the colleague is commenting from Rein, a PhD, somebody wouldn't be employable because they have no clue of what is happening. And you get somebody who's from a technical, the old technical setup, and the old technical setup from Pretoria, comes into the industry, you do the interview and you say, I really need you to prepare a cake, as an example, because this is like your simulation. They come in, they prepare the cake, you get an MBA, somebody who's a dietitian, can't cook the cake, but he's got cookery as a skill. So we're confusing ourselves, again, from the university background to the organizational. We need to be seeing at this current stage the linkage between education, between the theory, and between the practical, and the skills transfer, and talent mobility. Sam, I can't remember last year, he spoke about talent mobility as we were sitting here. It goes back into South African context. How visible is that? How prepared are we in terms of talent mobility and transferring of skills from one employee to the other? From a matriculant who has been disadvantaged to become something in the country where we can go back and say the skill is here, we're linking it to development, we're linking it to the economy, and it's a benefit to everybody. I think we're getting lost slowly but surely.
No, we're not giving that focus too much.
Yeah, you know one thing, I live by the philosophy that actually the first, the home is the first learning institution. What most people, I think they have done, they have actually outsourced education from their home. One of my kids was attending a high school in Rein. Somebody came and says, you know one thing, and it added to that philosophy to say that there are certain things that you learn at home. Discipline, self-control, you learn them at home. So the school is enhancing what you have already learned. So what has happened with people is that they have given the responsibility for educating their kids to the school and says everything else. I mean, why should I talk tautology? I talk me myself.
Actually, guys, you and yourself. It is a fact.
Now, part of how I approach for my own kids is that My kids actually, they have got programs at school, at home. They go to school, but there is other activities that actually they do. I mean, I was fortunate to go to an exchange program in the United States at high school level. When you look at what they do, they encourage actually their kids to be involved in extramural activities, and they participate in other activities. So you look at their kids, when they go to university, actually they have got a broad mind approach. One teacher, in fact, last year we were talking about a kid who was given a problem at school, and the problem was about a pizza. You understand? If you eat 2 pizzas, if you have 5 pizzas, you eat 2 pizzas, how many are left? The kids could not answer the thing because the kids could not conceptualize. So most people in this country, in fact, are not exposed to things. Now, coming on to the issue of actually training and development, I read a book actually a few years ago. It's called actually Leadership Scorecard. And this person says, you know one thing, training and development, there is 4 ways that contribute to success for people. He had actually a statistical model and says, actually formal education contributes about 10 to 15% of success. That's your formal studies. He says that another 10 to 15% of that comes from your own self-learning. Some people are educated, but they're not willing to learn beyond that. Then he says the third element is that about 20 to 25% of a person's success, it depends on who is mentoring you and advising you. And then he says roughly about 55% to 65% of success actually is on-the-job training.
Experience.
And most people, in fact, when I look at, in my 20 years of working life, most of the things actually I learned on the job. That is why, in fact, somebody, when they said to me that, in fact, the first 2 years or even 6 months in a job, you are learning. You are not actually contributing. So most people actually, they mistake, and I think I like what you said, that at school, actually what you've learned at university diploma, it actually proven that you have the ability to learn. Thank you.
Okay, can I take 2 comments, Alan, and maybe a third one there, and then back to you, Rein.
I had an opportunity to attend TED Global in September, and Chris Anderson that runs it asked a few of us to give comments after looking at all the presentations. And my comment was very simple, is when you listen to these amazing people, and you've probably all seen TED Talks, right, is that you realize that for people to be successful, they need a balance of wisdom and courage. And we are so focused on terms of increasing our wisdom, but we don't increase the courage. And one without the other is absolutely useless. It's actually quite devastating. Imagine a person with all the wisdom but no courage to act on it. And then imagine the person with all the courage but no wisdom. Which one would we rather be? I picked number 2. This guy has got a very nice life, right? So what I was thinking about in terms of looking at that is when you listen to these amazing people speak, they didn't start with the wisdom. They started with courage to set really ambitious targets for themselves and really believing that they deserve better, that they can do it. That's how they started. And then they had the courage to say, I can think independently, I can make a valuable contribution. And the third thing that takes a lot of courage is to not allow yourself to give yourself excuses. Well, my starting conditions were poor, so what will ever happen to me? Or, you know, I'm not formally educated. These guys never allow themselves to give themselves excuses, or the close cousin of that, feeling entitled, that the world somehow owes you something. It doesn't. So I think that's something that somehow the education system is lacking, is that even if we've done a bad job at the wisdom side, we are still trying, but somehow there's a huge lapse in teaching kids courage. To say it takes courage to set ambitious goals for yourself, to believe you can do something. It takes courage to think independently. It takes courage to not give yourself excuses. You know, you just need one case of a person that grew up in the worst possible starting conditions and they become successful, to realize that the starting conditions is not what limit people. It's the starting assumptions. So that, I think, would be my suggestion, is to think about how can we train people to have courage. What are the practical skills to give them that will allow them to set ambitious targets, allow them to think independently, allow them not to
For you, something that you can think of.
give themselves excuses of why not to do things.
Maybe there at the back, and then it's you.
Okay. I've had the unfortunate privilege of being involved in most of the institutions were mentioned here, from technical colleges up to technical as a lecturer facilitator. I've been with the so-called CETAs. Maybe to say what I want to say, let me start with an example. When I was growing up, I was quite fairly young. When they introduced the toll gate on the M3, Rein Hill, Durban, they said it was going to be a temporary measure until the debt is paid. I'm 40 this year, and I think I was about 10 when that happened. Instead, we've had more toll gates, and we now have e-tolls. So what am I trying to go with, to say with this is, she spoke of technicons. Technicons also came as a way of trying to bridge the gap, because we felt that technical skills were not adequate and we were not producing enough engineers at the time and technical personnel. Instead, on top of technicons, on top of technical colleges, we've added learnerships, we've added all sorts of things. I think it's what one of the speakers said in terms of having something to drive, in this case being the economy, to drive your strategies, your policies, what you want to achieve, is very important. I think as South Africa, probably because we are so much a wounded nation, we really have no direction. I mean, if I were to speak to policymakers, I would say the problem is there is no direction. We have so much, we don't believe in ourselves. There is nothing correct that we believe we can do. I remember when Prof, I remember his name, when he was telling us for management of technology, he actually mentioned that most of the technologies that you see out there are, some of them, some of them actually South African technologies. He even made a simple example of a company locally who supply trains like the How train, to France, to other nations. But when that company went to bid with our local government to get at least to supply some panels for the How train, they didn't even get a looking at it. We don't respect our own technology. We just don't respect anything that we can do. So that is what is affecting our education so much. I think we need to come up with some plan, some policy, some strategy. Decide what we want to do. I really don't believe that we're incapable. I mean, when you look at us competitively, if we were so incapable, Australia, UK, and all these other would not be poaching our professionals. Our doctors are all over. Our artisans are all over the world. Our engineers are all over the world. But somebody somewhere is saying that we're incapable. Somebody is seeing potential, but we're not. So I think it's time we started believing in ourselves, in our own ability, our own potential, and just get things going. We can. I mean, we are very smart, a smart group of people. We don't just have the sense of humor. We are very intelligent.
I would like you to make a closing comment, but I first want to give Edzai just a last comment.
Sorry. I just want to say, you just mentioned part of what I was going to say, where courage is important. We don't have something called the South African dream, and something that is parallel maybe to your American dream, because I've had the privilege of working with several Americans. Even if they're clueless of what they're doing, they are confident. They are, lots of courage. So I'm from Zimbabwe. Right now, if I go anywhere and I tell people I'm a mathematician, people respect me, and South Africans just cow, and I feed on that. Yeah. So, that South African dream, something that's a common vision, shared vision from top to bottom, which is actually important. And then I would like to thank you for saying that maths is important. You said it in an indirect way, because you said we learn so that what?
Learn how to learn.
To learn how to learn. Now, maths is just showing your ability to learn, right? You can go look at the etymology of the word mathematics. And then resilience, and on top of what you said, courage, resilience, and wisdom. Because in maths, when you're doing all those problems, it's like a simulation of life. It's like a simulation of a business scenario where you've got a series of problems and decisions that you have to make. So, the reason why most kids fail maths is because they are not resilient. So if you've got confidence, courage, then you build resilience, which can actually be seen even in the workplace. And then on the resilience part, I would want to ask, sorry, I've forgotten your name. Rein. After you've trained all these people, what is the retention rate? Because he brought up a very interesting point where he says we can't compete globally because it's too expensive for us. Now, after incurring that expense, do you get to keep those people because it's a small pool of individuals that have those kind of skills?
I should say that one on the every 5 or 6 will leave.
That's a high number. Well,
For our industry, it's low.
The problem is that you have mandated demographics required by companies. So you have to make a choice. Do I buy people or do I train people? Now, buying people is a quick fix. Because after all, training takes a few years. It's a race to the bottom. Fortunately, if you're the person that's being coached, it's wonderful.
So maybe we must talk again about you talking about mathematics, but we'll get to that. The last comment, Rein, to just conclude.
I would like to make 2 comments. One is that maybe I did not explain well why we choose Maurice University. We didn't choose them because we thought that graduates in general is going to solve our problem. We choose them because the kids that are studying there are there for 10 hours a day. They still have to travel from where they live to the university. They start with meditation in the morning. They work for about 3 to 4 hours a day. So when they finish the study, their, let's say, commitment and ability and the willingness to perform is extremely high. That's the reason we choose. That's one of the reasons we choose Maurice University. Second reason we choose them because they are prepared to work with us on the curriculum to see, okay, how can we optimize the curriculum to get better, let's say, a better workforce into our business. What we do with the students, or with the graduates at this stage, we don't use them in their field of expertise. We tell them, listen, this is our process. This is what we manage for our customers. Tell me, what do you see? What can we improve in this process? So we use them because we believe that their hunger and their willingness to observe and to look into why is this thing going like this, and then they ask people questions to say, why are you doing this? And they get very interesting answers. And the reason that they do things like they do because somebody told them to do so. So we only use them to have a fresh pair of eyes to use, let's say, teach them how to use Lean and Six Sigma and then put them into the process. And very quickly, most probably we can move them into some kind of a leadership position as well.
Formalized role.
Yeah. Second point I would like to make, just to give you some idea about what's happening in the world and our business. So one thing that we are doing in South Africa as well, and what's happening in the United States, and I'll give you some stats very quickly. If you look to, I don't know if you've ever heard about robotics, that's one of the topics that I would like to discuss today, but it actually was not possible to do that because of the time. So robotics is a piece of software in our business that can, based on business rules, can apply logic into a process, which means that every process that is currently done, for example, an accounts payable process where you process invoices or you do a reconciliation between a vendor statement and an ERP statement, as long as you can define business rules, a robot can do it. So we recently have implemented a robotic project where we have reduced the workforce with about 30%. And I strongly believe that in our business, if we have enough people that can think in processes and can break it down in logical steps and understand that a process is a loop, we are able to reduce about 30% of our headcount just by technology. Okay? If you look to the forecast for the United States, in 2020, at this stage it's about 60% of all the capital expenditure is related to technology. Okay? They expect that the biggest impact of this investment will be in the knowledge workers, as they call it. And they expect that by 2020 in the United States, about 50% of the workforce, the skilled workforce, needs to be retrained in order for them to cope with the new technology. So that's America. Now we go back to South Africa, where we start to apply logic, robotics, software, technology into our environment. Which means that I strongly believe in productivity. If you create more productivity, the economy will go better, you create more jobs. I think the policy of some people in this country is the other way around, to say, okay, I'm not working on productivity, I'm working on creating jobs. Okay, and the speed in which technology goes, and our industry is very much focused on technology and how to reduce headcount, because we need to do things more efficient and effective than our customers. And the only way to do that is to apply technology. So I'm sometimes thinking that by this new initiative, because I really believe that this initiative is going to work, but it might be that we're a bit late in doing it, because the technology is going to attack us from the back and overtake some of the, let's say, the need for certain resources, because the robot can do it. I only need people that can provide me the business rules to feed the robot. And I think that's unfortunately a bit the scary part, maybe I should say, of what's happening in the world.
Rein, thank you very much. Well, we could test your courage. Alan, I don't think we should, but we could. This is a Da Vinci gift, and the ideal is that as a guest speaker you should leave only once you've solved this problem. So we won't intimidate you, we will mingle around and hang around, but once you solve it you can send us a clip, a photo, a WhatsApp, because usually what we're interested is in the time that it took you to solve this problem.
Or the time it takes to outsource it.
And you can't outsource it. But thank you very much. We appreciate it. Good luck. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for a very interesting debate. I hope you will engage with Sophie. I think your focusing on statistics is not just about focusing on statistics. I think it's a much bigger discussion. And Rein, thanks for your contribution also. I think what is important for us is to understand that although you're in the business of saying we must get technology and have maybe less resources, it's about the efficiency and the optimization there are. And I think for all of us, that is an important part. I'm never worried that people want to use more technology, because we will just create more businesses that will have more people. So it doesn't mean there will be less people employed because in a company we use less people. There's still another company to be made and another one to run. Enjoy the time with us. If we can just have that book back, Sushi, if you don't mind. And if you're interested, please contact them in that regard, and we see you next month. Who is our guest speakers next month?
Dr. Ali Bacher.
Dr. Ali Bacher. You may not know him, you may know him. And if you don't, ask, but if you do, you know who he is. And we're very pleased to have him. As you may know, he's one of our Laureate Award recipients 2 years ago, and last year actually, 2013. And he, as part of his give back, he's going to be the guest speaker next time. So welcome to all of you. Thank you very much. Thanks.